Hey there guys, I am SonicGhost, and today we're here to unbox the brand new Nintendo console, the Nintendo Switch 2. This system just released at the time I'm filming this unboxing on June 5th, 2025. And we got a mountain of accessories that came alongside of the Switch 2's launch here, and we're going to be taking a look at all of these different items in today's video. But before we go any further, I want to give a huge thank you and shout out to my friend Ethan for helping me secure my pre-order for the Nintendo Switch 2. This system was a very hard system to get on order, and my friend Ethan was able to help me secure my own Nintendo Switch 2. I'm eternally grateful to you. Thank you so much for your help. This would not be possible right now, this unboxing video and future content revolving around the Nintendo Switch 2. Thank you so much. I greatly appreciate your assistance with securing a Nintendo Switch 2. Huge shout out go to my friend Ethan. But before we actually unbox the system here, I do have a little bit of a story that I want to tell about the Nintendo Switch 2 release. As here in North America, there were midnight launch events for the Nintendo Switch 2 at both Best Buy stores and GameStop locations. And I went to the midnight launch for the Nintendo Switch 2 at my local Best Buy. It was a very fun event. We had a lot of different people there waiting for the system in a pre-order line, and on the other side of the store was a line that was very long for people doing a walk-in buy for the system, hoping they would get their hands on a Nintendo Switch 2 at launch. Everyone was super chill. We all had a very fun time talking about all of our upcoming release hopes here for the Switch 2, the games we're going to be playing at launch, and just a bunch of other cool things in general revolving around gaming, technology, such like that. It was a very fun time, and it was something I've never done before. I never went to a midnight launch for any console, period. So being able to go to the Best Buy midnight launch here was a very fun and memorable experience. And because I went to a midnight launch for the Switch 2, I got an extra little prize for it. So we will be unboxing one extra thing here that was not shown on the table. This is a commemorative coin from Best Buy. So if we go ahead, take it out of its said bubble wrap here, we can see this is your said coin. It is themed around the console's logo, so Nintendo Switch 2 on the back here. It is also a Best Buy logo, but as you can see on the wrapper, it says for promotional use only, not for resale, as the store was only giving out a limited supply of these said coins to people on the midnight release for the Nintendo Switch 2 itself. So, because I had my system on pre-order at my local Best Buy for pickup, I was able to secure one of these Nintendo Switch 2 promotional coins. So this is just a nice little extra thing to have in my collection, and it shows that I went to a midnight release for this brand new console. And again, I've never done a midnight release before for any console at all. So this one here specifically, this is going to be a token for me to remember that said midnight release. It was a lot of fun just getting to talk to a bunch of different people in line waiting for the system, and I have a proof of that said event in the form of this said coin. But I think now, without any further ado, it's time for us to take a look at the actual console along with these accessories. Now we'll be taking a look at the Joy-Con grip along with the Joy-Con 2 controllers itself once we open the actual Nintendo Switch. So these items I'll be setting aside. We're not going to be featuring the charging grip here in this video along with the extra set of Joy-Cons simply because these are a little redundant, but I will be having shorts coming out for these said items in their own separate unboxing videos. So if you want to just see how the charging grip works with the Switch 2, which it's essentially the same as the one in the box, but with a charging port on top, and then just how they package the Joy-Con 2 controller separate, check out those said shorts separately. I'll leave a link in the description to those shorts when they're out here on my channel. But these are the accessories we'll be taking a look at today. The Switch 2 Pro controller, the console itself, along with its own camera. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get this unboxing started. So to start off this unboxing experience of the Nintendo Switch 2, I think it's appropriate we open up the console first here. And specifically, the version of the Nintendo Switch 2 I have is the one that came with a digital code for Mario Kart World, which is a launch title for this said new console. So take a look at the system up close here. We can see in the box, here is your new system with the newer design. Looks very sleek. Here is our included copy of Mario Kart World, just put right on the top here. This is actually a sticker, so this can peel off. It's just a standard Nintendo Switch 2 box itself with this extra little add-on on top of it. If we go ahead, flip it here on its side, you got the Nintendo logo here on the top. On the bottom, you have all of your information about what's in the said system, alongside of just some extra stuff here about, health and safety warnings, some license information, stuff like that. But you can see in the box, you get the console, you get the Joy-Con 2s, the AC adapter, charging cable, the dock, the Joy-Con 2 grip, some straps, and an HDMI cable. All standard stuff. Over here on the side, we got a picture of people using the Switch 2 in tabletop mode with the Joy-Cons separated. So that's a nice little picture there showcasing how the system can be used in its portable state. Over here on the other side of the box, we got someone playing the system in handheld mode on the go. Again, nice little representation of how the system works. And on the back, you got a picture of someone taking out the system from its dock or putting it in, could be either one. So this demonstrates the Switch 2 alongside of its actual docking station here. So I think without any further ado, it's time for us to go ahead and open up this system. So got a little piece of tape here that we want to go ahead and cut off. It's actually easier just to pull this back instead of cutting it in. So that opens up this flap. Then from here, the system can just open right up. And we even have some instructions here, along with the system trying to break free. We're not ready for you yet, Switch 2. So here is some instructions of how to use it. You got plug it in as step 1, set up for step number 2, and it even tells you some of the extra things here of how to detach the Joy-Con 2 controllers, where the power button is, to how to turn it on or wake it from sleep mode, stuff like that. You even got a QR code down below for customer service. So all useful information. But inside of the box, the first thing you see is the console along with its controllers. So I think we should look at those Joy-Cons first, as they are right front and center to the actual system. Here they are, the new Joy-Con 2 controllers. So taking them right out of their packaging, we'll take a look at these things up close and personal, one at a time. So here is the left Joy-Con 2. It's actually a nice size compared to the original Joy-Con, which I do have here for reference sake. So we'll take a look at those in just a minute. Here on the back, you got your triggers, your L and your ZL buttons. Here we got a release. This is going to be for its magnet technology, how it actually connects to the system. We flip over here on its side. You can see we got, actually it's upside down based on this direction. We got ourselves the SL and SR buttons, which are the inside shoulder buttons, much bigger compared to how they were on the original Joy-Con controllers, because those things were extremely small. Here we got ourselves where the magnet would connect to the Switch 2 itself. And yeah, everything else about this controller feels nice and rugged, has a nice texture to it. You can kind of hear that. It's not going to be picked up the best in the microphone, but the stick here also feels pretty nice, very smooth. Just in general, this does feel like a nice improvement over the original Joy-Con from the first Nintendo Switch console. And taking a look at the other one here, this is the right Joy-Con. We see there's an extra button on this one, as here on the left Joy-Con, we got ourselves our D-pad, and then this button down below, which is the capture button, how you would take screenshots and videos on your Switch 2. But this controller has the home button here underneath the joystick, and then this C button. This activates the game chat functionality on your Nintendo Switch 2. So you can talk to your friends via the game chat there. We got ourselves some buttons here that are bigger than the original Joy-Con. Got ourselves everything that you would expect, again, flipping around on its side. You got yourself the newer design SR and SL buttons, so they're much bigger. They feel better. Got the magnet here in the center, how it attached to your system. You got the ZL and ZR buttons feeling nice and sturdy. The release switch here. Everything does check out on this said Joy-Con, and in fact, if I compare them to the original Joy-Cons from the Nintendo Switch 1, this is the Joy-Con 2, and this is the Joy-Con 1. So just side by side, you can already see a pretty big difference here. Quite literally, the Joy-Con 2 is much bigger, and the buttons are bigger as well. So it feels better in the hands. The buttons just overall feel much better by comparison. There's the sync button compared to the original, so even the sync button's easier to get to. Feels better as a whole. Everything about these controllers, just by comparison to the original Joy-Con, feel so much more robust and comfortable. So I do hope that these Joy-Con, just in general, last longer than the original, because the original Joy-Cons were known for having signal issues, having some bad stick drift over a while time. They were not the most comfortable to hold in your hand sideways, but with the newer Joy-Con, this definitely feels a lot better in your hand. Still not as comfortable as just using two Joy-Cons together or a proper Pro controller, but still, this newer Joy-Con design, much better than the old by comparison. But the downside is the color scheme, just being all black with some color accents to the controller compared to just being flat out different colors. And then you're also missing the old IR sensor on the right Joy-Con. That is now absent from the Switch 2. They don't have that sensor at all. So in original Switch games that use this IR sensor, which aren't many, mind you, but those said games will not work on the Switch 2 unless you use the original Joy-Con. So games like 1-2 Switch, for example, or Ring Fit Adventure, you're gonna still need the original Joy-Con to play those, as the Joy-Con 2 just does not have that IR functionality. So you will still need the original Joy-Con lying around for some older Switch games. But that is it for our said Joy-Con here. So now let's go ahead, take out the system, and take a look at the actual console here up close. So sliding her out, this here is the brand new Nintendo Switch 2. All screen here in the front, so it's going to be a little hard to show all this. Although I do see, based on the bezels here, it's for the most part all screen, barely any bezel to actually see. There's a little bezel here on the edge, but we can see better once we turn on the screen the bezel ratio. Here on the side, this is how the Joy-Con 2 connect to the system. So what you would do is just take these Joy-Con, and here in the center we see some pins which are for your magnet, and thankfully these are not sharp pins or anything, so it's not going to be easy for these just to get bent off. These are flat pins and they're pretty big, so I don't see these being a problem in terms of reliability. But you can see the color-coded sign here for what the color Joy-Con would be, but also there is a minus symbol here showing, hey, that's for your left controller because that has a minus. So to attach the controllers, all you would do is just line it up, and then it just connects with a magnet, and it is on there. It's not coming off. To release it, if you want that Joy-Con to come back off, you press the release switch on the back, which has some give, so you're not going to hit this by accident. So you just hold that in, and then it just pops right off. So that's very, very nice feeling. Now to put on the other Joy-Con here, but just to demonstrate one thing, just the size difference alone, you cannot use original Joy-Con on the Switch 2 because this is how it would look. Even if you try to center it, it's still not right. It's not even close. So there's a reason why these won't work, and this uses the old rail technology, which was slide on, and that just flat out is not going to work. So you can't attach your original Joy-Cons from the Switch 1 onto your Switch 2. You do need the newer Joy-Con instead, but it's so satisfying to hear that magnet, and the system feels very nice in the hands. It is nice and hefty. It is a very sturdy feeling device. Like, it's a nice feeling handheld console. If you take a look at the other parts of the system up here on the top, we got ourselves the game cartridge slot. So in here, we would just pop open this top flap piece, which is actually opening up as a sliding mechanism this time around. So instead, in the older systems, it'd be a door to open. Here on the Switch 2, the game key cards or your actual physical releases will just go in by just sliding it in and out. And then from here, you can pull back the flap and put in your game cartridge, which I do like this. This actually does feel a little more robust from the old system. Then you got yourself a headphone jack here, a USB-C jack, so you can connect either a charging cord to this top part or other devices like, say, the new USB camera that works with the Switch 2. You got yourself, obviously, the cooling solution here. Got some fan vents. Here we got ourselves some volume buttons and also the power button. If we take a look here on the bottom, we got ourselves more grills here. This looks like the speaker grill. Got ourselves our charging port down below, and this is also how it will send out video through the Switch 2 dock to your TV. And on the back, got the nice Switch 2 logo and a newer kickstand, which is very similar to the kickstand, I would say, for the Switch OLED console, because it goes back pretty far. This is the furthest back it will go. So on a table, your Switch 2 could just be straight up, or you can start angling it more and more, having it at any given angle you want. So this is a much more robust kickstand, even better than the Switch OLED in some regards. Down here as well, underneath the kickstand, this is where you put your micro SD cards. Now, mind you, the Switch 2 does use a newer standard of SD cards here, if I can get it to show up on camera. This uses micro SD express cards. Nintendo did say you can use the older micro SD standard from the Switch 1 on the Switch 2, but it would only work for your album information, so screenshots and video. It will not store your games anymore. So you do need a newer SD card type. They're a little hard to get right now because they're a very new standard. So at the time of launch, there's not many options for SD cards for the Switch 2, but hopefully that will change in the future. But in terms of the system, this does feel like a big improvement over the original design. I have a Switch OLED here by comparison, which is the more up-to-date version of the console. And you can already see a pretty big size difference between the two. It is noticeably larger here with the Switch 2 compared to the Switch OLED. This version here does have a more robust kickstand, and this kickstand can only go out this far, which gives you that same kind of like super vertical angle that the Switch 2 has. But the kickstands by comparison here, they do feel very different, but I do think the material for the Switch 2 kickstand is a little bit easier to work with. And it does feel like it's holding the angle a little bit better compared to using the OLED docks here, or the OLED's kickstand in general, because this does feel a lot more flimsy and doesn't feel like this part specifically here where it actually touches the ground. That sometimes can be pushed down a little bit more, but the Switch 2, I'm pushing on it, it's not moving. The Switch OLED, yeah, that angle is getting more and more deep. So by far, this has a better kickstand. And don't even get me started about the original Switch, because here's my launch model Switch from 2017, and here's its kickstand. That's it. That's all you got. And even then, this thing came off every other time you tried to use it. It was not the most robust system. The kickstand itself was very bad. This is the most you had, even in half the time. This would happen, where the system would just fall over because of the weight, and the kickstand would just pop right off. So overall, much better kickstand by comparison. And booting up the system for the first time, let's see how it compares in screen size. So there's your Nintendo logo. And there it is, the Switch 2 interface. Looking at the screens by comparison here to my Switch OLED, as this is probably the best example, this screen is very similar to what I'm seeing with the original Switch more than the Switch OLED, as it does have a decent bezel, but this is a larger screen, being at around 7 inches. So I think it's a more applicable example here to have my original Switch and the Switch 2 here side by side. As you can see, the bezels are very similar between the two, so this does have a decent sized bezel. Not as big as the original, but not as small as the Switch OLED. This is an LCD panel once again, so we're back to how the Switch 1 handled things on the go, but this was a 720p screen, while with the Switch 2, we got ourselves a 1080p screen, and games can run in HDR, 120 Hz. It is a better panel overall. Some people will argue that the Switch OLED has a better screen still just because of it being an OLED display. So it has true blacks and better color range as a whole, which can be true, but to get that higher refresh rate and HDR compatibility on the Switch 2, I understand why they went with this technology instead. But let's go ahead and put the system into sleep mode and take a look at what else is in this box, because we're not done looking inside the box yet. There's still more stuff. So if we lift up this piece here, there is stuff underneath it, but also there's stuff in here too. Like for example, my Mario Kart World Tour code. So I scratch off this information here for my download code, go to the eShop, and I get my copy of Mario Kart World on the Nintendo Switch 2. So I'll definitely be doing that later. We got ourselves a health and safety pamphlet, you know, your usual legal information here. We have cables for the system. So here is the HDMI cable, and specifically this is an Ultra HDMI cable. So this is an HDMI 2.1 cable, which I do find interesting as the system can only output at most 4K 60 HDR, which falls in the HDMI 2.0 spec range. So this cable is technically more than what the system needs, but this will be perfect to use for the said console, and definitely going in my setup. So here we got ourselves some Nintendo branding on the actual cable itself. Nintendo does seem to be the only company that does put their name on their cables for accessories and such. We got ourselves HDMI written on the other side, so typical things there. And the cord itself looks like it could be about, I would say 4 feet, which isn't the longest cord, but if you're going to have your Switch 2 dock right next to your TV, then this should be enough cord for you. But if not, you might have to get a longer cord. Just make sure it does have the necessary specifications for the Switch 2. So at least an HDMI 2.0 cable or better that get the most out of your console. But let's put that aside because we still have more stuff in here. We got the Joy-Con 2 wrist straps here. And I will say, these look very different compared to the Switch 1's version of the Joy-Con straps. So I'm going to take both of these out of the wrapper, and we'll take a look at these individually on the Switch 2 Joy-Con. But these here are the said straps. And again, very different looking by comparison to how the original Joy-Con straps are, because they have this big gaping hole part in the middle. So they're more of a frame this time than an actual grip. Here we can see a little button on the top. Actually, that's not even a button, that's more of a cutout, so that could be a little confusing at first, but that is how it would connect right here. We got our magnet, so both of these said Joy-Con grips, they will just attach with magnets to the actual Joy-Con 2, presumably. So let's say we take off our left Joy-Con here and take a strap. So we do, oh no, they're actually coordinated. So as you can see here, this is a minus and this is a plus. So we do need the other strap. So you combine the blue with the red. No, actually, other way around. You flip them so you can have either or. This is a very interesting design. They are interchangeable, which is very, very unexpected, but here we are. So there you go. It is attached. I have the red one attached to the blue Joy-Con. It does feel a little awkward to line up at first, I will admit, but this does give you a little bit of extra grip here on the controller, and also now you have a wrist strap so you can just put this on, tighten it up, and this would be good for motion control games. And anytime you want to get off the Joy-Con 2 strap, it's just like with the actual system. You press the release button here and it'll pop off the said magnets. So you either have a minus side here or a plus side, and you can use either or to connect your said Joy-Con 2 strap to your Joy-Con 2 controller. And it is, again, a very interesting design. It's going to take some time to get used to this, but it does do its job. I don't really use these straps too much on my Joy-Cons, but every once in a while they are nice to have. But these specific pieces here will be useful for the mouse mode specifically, as the Joy-Con 2 can work as a mouse specifically with the right Joy-Con here. But if I take a look at, say, the other version of these said Joy-Cons, these here are the Joy-Con 1 rails. So same idea, plus or minus, you just put this on your controller any given way and it slides on, and it gives you more button to work with for the shoulder buttons here specifically, which is really important. You got yourself your strap, and then you just pop it off by holding a release button and then just sliding off the rail. But they did actually stick on here pretty well. They had a lock button, so you had to unlock it from below, then you can rail it, and then it will come right off of your controller. But these specific rails were known for breaking over time, so these specific rail mechanisms were very prone for failing compared to the newer design here with the Switch 2 with magnets, where they just pop on and off very seamlessly and very easy. And plus these have the added benefit of having the rubber grip pieces here that can easily slide around to use in mouse mode, and it works on almost any material from what I've heard. So interesting design. It will take some time to get used to these said grips, but they are in a lot of ways an improvement over the original rail design, simply because of magnets. Take a look at the other stuff here in the box. We put aside the first layer box. There is still more things left here in our Switch 2 box. So the rest of the stuff here is all pretty standard. We got ourselves our power brick here for the Switch 2 itself, which is pretty hefty, I will say, but standard power brick. But it is interesting to see it's just the power brick by itself with a USB-C connection. So you can get this piece separately and connect any kind of USB-C cable to this, as long as it can provide enough power through this said brick, as this does use more power compared to the Switch 1 docks. So you will definitely need to use this AC adapter here, and here's the information of what this pulls, at least in the North American region, so you can read this for yourself and see exactly what you need to power your Switch 2 in dock mode. Putting that aside, next up here we have this, which looks like the USB-C to C cable. This will be used for the system itself, plugging right into the said charging brick or directly to the console. But yeah, this is just your standard USB-C to C cable. Nothing too special about it, except it will be able to provide enough power for the system to actually work. So, getting off this twist tie that they put on a little too tight. Nice longish cable. Seems like this is also 4 feet, so you might have to have this a little bit closer to your wall outlet than maybe the Switch 1's power cord, but here it is, USB-C to USB-C. Easy to plug one end here into the power adapter, and then the other end either into your Switch 2 dock or even the Switch 2 itself, whether it be on the bottom here or with the top USB. And then you can just charge your system using this, not even needing to play on your dock if you just wanted to go all portable to begin with. So there is your charging solution / power option. Next up here, we got ourselves the Joy-Con 2 controller grip. So I have the original Joy-Con grip here for comparison, and as you can see, very big difference. This one specifically is the charging grip for the Joy-Con, so it has a USB-C on top. The one that comes in the box for the Switch 2 console does not have a charging grip. You do have to buy that separately, unfortunately, which I do think this should just be in the box with a charger, but that's besides the point. This one here had a little bit more bump on the side for the controller. This is more flat by comparison. And if you connect your Joy-Con here to it, so let's take off both the left and the right Joy-Con. take those with our charging grip here. You just line them up and just snaps right on. Take the other Joy-Con, put that on as well. Once again, just line her up. Easy. Feels pretty good. I will say the handle's not having any ridges here and just being flat is gonna be kind of weird because I do feel like this part will dig into your hand a little bit. So I would have preferred that having a little bit more of a rounded edge like the original Joy-Con grips. But overall, this does feel pretty nice and a better way of using your Joy-Con compared to just having them in your hands separately for certain games. And then here on the back, very easy to get to those release buttons. Then you can just take off your Joy-Con 2 at any given time. And again, compared to the original Joy-Con grip, these you had to slide on. They locked in place. You want to take off a Joy-Con, hold that release button, and slide it up. So these had a little bit more give in your Joy-Con grip compared to the Switch 2, which I cannot move these Joy-Con at all. They are in there. And to release it, then I have to press those release buttons to get those Joy-Con off by comparison. And for one last comparison between the two, here's how the Joy-Con grips look side by side. And again, you can see very similar design, and this is in general about the same width between the two controllers, but this has a little bit more length. This does have the rounded edges, so the original Joy-Con grip, your hands rested here on this side piece, so it did feel a little bit more comfortable to hold it for long periods of time. Felt like a natural controller, just a little bit smaller than what you're used to, compared to the Switch 2 grip here, where it does feel good, but your hands are resting more on the edge of the actual grip itself, so you'll definitely want to move them in a little bit more. So there's a little bit of a gap between your hand and the grip, so it's going to take some time to get used to. I'll have to play around this for a while and see how it feels compared to the original Joy-Con grip, but it still feels like a very solid controller. And I am definitely a fan of just how the Joy-Cons attach by comparison to the original. And now for our final thing in the box, we have the Switch 2 dock itself. This dock here is very big compared to the original Switch dock. As you look on the side, we got ourselves two USBs, but also a pretty big back side here to the dock. And if we open up the back flap, which opens from the top, comes right off, we can see here, if we get a little bit closer, we got ourselves a USB-C, we have an HDMI, and also we have Ethernet in, meaning you can use a wired internet connection with your Switch 2 right out of the box, which is really, really good because when the Switch 1 released, its dock did not have a LAN port inside the dock itself. You had to get an external adapter and plug it in via USB-C. But here, this just works right out of the box with a Ethernet cord, which is very good. And it's modeled around the Switch OLED dock from what I can see. It's a very similar design in terms of the connections. You get two USBs and one Ethernet, same setup as the Switch OLED dock. And then the panel pops off in a very similar way to the Switch OLED dock and then just pops back on. Although this feels way more robust and it's not going to pop off at any given time, which was my major complaint with the Switch OLED dock. This back cover never stayed on. It always popped off anytime you messed with a wire. It just did not have any grip. But cables will feed out here from the bottom, so all your cables can be nicely routed here from the back right side of your Switch 2, which is good. If you look here on the inside, we can see our connection to the actual console itself. There's your USB-C in the center, so we can say take our system here, move that box out of our way, put the dock here, take our console, for example, here, make sure you have the left Joy-Con, the right Joy-Con going this specific way, so left and right, as you need to line up that USB-C on the bottom right to the dock itself. Then it just pops right in, and it has plenty of give here on the system, so it's not going to get too close to the screen itself, just like how the Switch OLED dock was designed for the Switch consoles there. And then you can just pull it out pretty easily. You can do it one-handed very fine because it doesn't pull back your system. So it has a nice firm connection, but it's not too bad to get it back out. So overall, feels like a nice robust dock, pretty hefty. we got ourselves some grills on the bottom, as this actually has a fan this time around built into the dock. So the Switch 2 being a more powerful system than the original Switch, it needs better cooling when it's in docked mode. So this dock itself has its own fan that takes air in and pushes it out and keeps the system cooled. So overall, a very interesting design here for the dock. You can see all the grills here and there for air can travel in and out of the system. It's a very nice, robust feeling dock, very nice, robust feeling controllers, and a very nice and robust actual console itself. So that is everything that comes in the Switch 2 box itself. So now let's take a look at some of the accessories I have here for the Nintendo Switch 2. Alright, so now we're going to move on to the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller here. This is a must-have controller type for the Nintendo Switch 2, and thankfully, if you already own the original Switch Pro controllers, they will work alongside with your original Joy-Cons on the Switch 2, but this Switch 2 Pro controller does have some extra stuff about it that may be worth picking up. So let's take a look at the Switch 2 Pro controller here. So up close and personal, you can see very similar design to the original Switch Pro controller, which I do have here on standby, which we will be comparing these two later. But it has the brand new chat button here next to the right stick. So there's one new thing. We take a look here on the side, we can see people using the controller with the extra buttons on the bottom, the customizable G buttons. This is a new thing to the Switch 2 Pro controller that you won't get on the original Switch 1 controller. You take a look here on the side, there's someone using the controller up close, just on the front facing side of it. The bottom here doesn't really have any information, just some branding stuff on the bottom, so nothing too fancy back here. On the top is just Nintendo branding, again, nothing too fancy. And then on the back here, we got some information about the controller itself, talk about some of its newer features like the C button, the customizable GL, GR buttons, how to hook it up to your console itself. All pretty standard stuff, but now let's go ahead and crack open the box here for our Pro controller. So I'm going to just take a knife, slide into the sides of these said package here, and just cut out these pieces of tape. Now from here, we can open up the controller and take a look at the inside. So here we go. Here's our said Pro controller, but first things first, the top piece here, kind of an important thing to have, you know, a charging cable. So this here is a USB-A to USB-C cable, and this is how you will charge your controller. So one end here, the USB-C end goes in the controller, the other end, USB-A, can go into the side of the Switch 2 dock or any other USB-A capable device like a power bank or your computer, for example, wall outlet, anything that takes standard USB-A. You can also just use any other cable you have lying around, like another USB-C to C, and connect the Switch 2 with the USB-C cable to the USB-C to the controller itself. So any kind of cable will work here, not just the one they have included, thankfully. But let's take a look at the actual controller here for our Switch 2 Pro controller. So here it is up close, and man, this thing feels nice in terms of its finish. Nothing glossy about this one from what I can tell, and that's a big plus compared to the original controller. It feels very, very robust. So if we can take a close look here, get the camera to focus in on our actual controller, we can see here on the face, there's our C button right down here below. So you press that and it activates the game chat on Switch 2. You got yourself your D-pad here, which is supposed to have been a revamped version of the D-pad on these Pro controllers. Supposedly, it's supposed to be a better D-pad compared to the ones from the Switch 1 Pro controllers, but all the other buttons are the same. Standard face buttons, sticks feel the same here, although they have a little bit of a better travel range. They have, obviously, nice feeling clicks. You got the top buttons here for plus and minus, home, the capture button. Here on the top, we got ourselves our shoulder buttons here, so the Z buttons. We got the L and R buttons, a sync button here on the side, and also the charging port and the battery indicator light here when it's charging or dying. So everything is checking out here. And then if you look at the bottom, this is where the new stuff comes in, as here we got ourselves our programmable GR and GL buttons. This can be used to map any action to these said buttons when playing a game. So for example, if you're playing something like Splatoon and you want to use D-pad down to use your booyah bombs or to jump back to base, you can map that to one of these G buttons on the back. So instead of having to reach down to your controller every time you're playing and go for your D-pad down, instead you can hold the controller like this, and then you can actually just press the button while still keeping your finger on the joystick, which is a very nice improvement here and just feels robust as a whole. If we take a look at the Switch 2 Pro controller compared to the original Switch Pro controller here, you can see the design for the most part is essentially one-to-one between the two controller types. The sticks though, they do feel better on the Switch 2 controller compared to the Switch 1. They just feel like they have a better travel range. You can even see just the thickness of the sticks being ever so slightly different too. So it does seem like these are better designed joysticks, just like with the Joy-Con controllers from Joy-Con 1 to Joy-Con 2. But everything else is the same in terms of its button design. So you can see the triggers here and the shoulder buttons are the same. You got the top panel being the same, although on the Switch 1 Pro controller, this was a glossy finish compared to the Switch 2, which is just a nice matte finish. So that's less prone to scratching and fingerprints, just overall a better look and design. And this still has all the same functionality, so it has amiibo support where you tap in the middle, compared to the Joy-Cons where you still tap on the actual right stick, on the right Joy-Con. It has the motion control to it. It's all the same, but you also have on the Switch 2 Pro controller a headphone jack, which the original Switch Pro controller did not have that. In fact, on the bottom, that's where your indicator light was, instead of up here for what player your controller is connected as, for like player 1, 2, or 3. So this right here is just a better designed version of the original Switch Pro controller, but you can still use this original Pro controller on the Switch 2. You just do not have the game chat, the headphone jack, or any of those customizable buttons on the back of the controller. But you do have all that if you get the Switch 2 Pro controller, and this just overall feels like the best way to play Switch 2 games on the brand new system. This just feels very robust and has so many different features that can be useful for any kind of player, no matter the game. But that was the Switch 2 Pro controller compared to the original. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at one more accessory here for our Nintendo Switch 2, its brand new camera. So for our final accessory for today's unboxing video, let's take a look at the brand new released Nintendo Switch 2 camera. This camera here will be used for some of the Switch 2 titles. One that we already know about will be using the Switch 2 camera is Super Mario Party Jamboree, with its Switch 2 upgrade coming in July of this year. But you can also use the Switch 2 camera to video chat with your friends using the game chat feature on Nintendo Switch 2. So if you want to use video, you're gonna need a camera, and this is the one Nintendo made for their system. It looks like it's on its nice old stand here, so essentially their own kind of tripod, and the cable routed into the back, into the bottom of the camera, just like a standard old webcam here. If we take a look, we got the writing here on the side, Nintendo Switch 2 camera. Got the design here on the front of the box. On the side, we can see someone using the camera, opening it up or closing it for use, as if you just twist the camera, that opens and closes the lens. So you can actually use this thing at any given time with your system, but you can close it up if you're concerned about your said privacy while playing with your Switch 2. And here on the other side, we can see the camera being angled up and down, and also plugged into the top port of the Switch 2, being directly connected to the console. On the bottom here, we just got some standard writing from company trademarks and such, and on the top is just Nintendo's branding. On the back is where you want to go to see how this camera will work with its features. So use this tabletop camera for the Switch 2 game chat, along with obviously some games that feature your video feed. You got a high sensitivity image sensor and wide angle lens, which we'll have to see how wide angle and high sensitivity they really mean once we plug it into the system. But it has adjustable view, built-in privacy shutter, and you just connect this directly to the console with the included USB cable right to the top USB port. So pretty easy to set up. And you can use it either in the dock mode or in handheld mode because of this. But let's go ahead and crack open this camera here. So I'm just going to cut through the tape on the side of the box. And now let's open this up and take a look at that webcam. So we just slide out this piece of cardboard, and here is our Nintendo Switch 2 camera. So I'll just open the flap, revealing in here a USB cable. So this is going to be a USB C to C that will connect the camera directly to your Nintendo Switch 2. And want to take a look at the overall length of this, as this is kind of an important thing to have a decent length cable for. And it looks like this cable is about 4 feet, so you're going to need to have your camera pretty close to where your Switch 2 is located. You're not going to have this, say, halfway across your room if your TV is on one side of the room, but you want the camera closer to you, so you want it near your couch. That may not be happening with the included cable. You might have to get a longer one, but it is USB-C to C, so one end goes into the camera, the other end goes into your console. And taking a look at the camera here itself, popping it out of its said box clamshell, I want to go ahead now, slide it out of the bag. And here it is. This is the Switch 2 camera. And right away I can tell the base here is very solid, as this is metal. You got the bottom here with some plastic material, but it does have a rubber base, so when you put the camera down, it's not going to move anywhere. In fact, I moved my table before I moved the camera itself, showing how grippy this bottom base can be. It has some rating information on the bottom from Nintendo, some trademarking stuff, you know, the usual stuff you would see on the bottom of any given product. You got yourself a little cable routing clip right here, so you can attach your cable into the bottom of the camera here. As we can see with that USB-C, it's a little hard to get the focus. There you go. So you just plug in one end of your USB-C cable just to the back here of your camera. Then you can take the other part of your cable here running down the bottom, clip it to the base itself, just like so. And now your cable is nicely routed here onto your stand for the camera itself. And here we can see the tilting angle of the camera going up and down. So this is the lowest it will go, and this is the highest it will go by comparison. As for a table shot, again, here's the highest, pointing straight up on an angle like so. And if we take a look going down, it will point downwards a little bit, but not terribly much. So it's not the biggest angle range here, but it does the job. This does not come off the base though, so you will have to use this camera with the included base. If you want to mount this to the console in handheld mode, that's not going to happen. But we can take a look here at the camera itself. Here's your privacy shutter. So it has a nice little white cover on the inside, nicely blocking out the lens if you're not wanting to use the camera while still keeping it connected to your console. And then when you want to be seen, just flip down that privacy shutter and there you go. Looks like we got an indicator light here on the side of the lens, so you can see when the camera is active on the console.
Alright, so we're going to do a little bit of a webcam test here for the Nintendo Switch 2 camera, but we'll show how the Nintendo Switch 2 camera looks on the actual Switch 2 itself. And to do this, we can go into the system settings here. You scroll all the way down to controller and accessories, go down in this list, and right here we're going to have a section just for the Switch 2 camera. So you can update the Switch 2 camera in the Switch 2 itself. Right now, the firmware is already up to date on the camera, so I don't need to update it. But if we go here to test USB camera, there we are. Now you can see how the camera looks here on the Switch 2. And I will say the quality of the camera via the console itself doesn't do the Switch 2 camera justice, because there's a little bit of a lower frame rate here. You don't get to see the full picture of the camera because we are rendering this in just a smaller square, but I am filming this in 4K, so you're going to see the images still at least the 1080p that the camera advertises. But here is the entire view of the camera. This has a very wide lens. You can go ahead, tilt up the camera up this high. You can tilt it down this low, so it has a pretty good reach when it comes to its overall movement. And if you want to just disable the webcam entirely without unplugging it from your system, you can just do this. So now the camera is no longer working as I closed the privacy shutter. But let's go ahead and open it back up. So now you may have noticed that our icon changed when we have our privacy shutter closed to a circle with a line through it, and it's a gray background. Well, this is because now we are not using the Switch 2 camera on our Switch 2 anymore. Instead, if I go ahead and open up the camera lens, now you can see the camera in its full glory. So I've connected the Switch 2 camera now to my computer, as this just works on any computer in my experience. It gets recognized just as any other webcam would, and it runs at a max of 1080p at 30 frames per second here in Windows. So now you can see the full 1080p 30 frames per second movement, and also you got that huge frame of view here. The actual camera supports up to 110 degree FOV, so you get a very wide angle, and you can just look at how much of the space that you can see here with this frame of view. It's insane, but as you can tell, the further I'm away from the camera, the harder it is to notice anything in detail. And if I zoom in on my face right now, you're going to notice a lot of that detail is gone, which is going to be a big problem for the Switch 2 camera when you're using it on the Switch 2 itself, because the further away you're from your camera and you have to pinch in on someone's face from far away, the less quality you're going to get overall. And this is what the Switch 2 is going to do in its game chat. So this could be a similar situation here, where I'm very far away right now from the camera, like a good 15 or so feet, but I can walk a little bit closer, and we can say right here, this is a more normalized distance away from the camera, as you can see here from the fully zoomed out shot. But if we zoom back in, this once again is how things are going to look when you're zooming in. Now I'm like about 10 feet away, a little bit closer to the camera, probably how far you'll be from your TV. So this is a lot better to work with, but still, you're going to lose a little quality when you zoom in on this said camera because of how wide of a view it has. But let's go ahead and zoom back out, and let's make our way back over to the desk here, as I want to show off a comparison between this camera and a completely different webcam. This here is the Insta360 Link 2C. This is my main webcam, and I'm just using this as a point of comparison because, as you can tell here, the frame of view much smaller by comparison. The quality is a lot sharper, and one big thing I haven't mentioned is autofocus, and this is where the Switch 2 camera has something I would feel probably most people won't need, but in some cases you might want to have, and that is autofocus. So as you can see, I hold this box up close and personal to my current webcam, and it focuses on the details easily. But we go back to the Switch 2 camera, and we do the same thing with this. You can see not only does it not focus on the said stuff right in front of it, because this has a fixed focus, which, to be fair, most people only need a fixed focus camera, especially if they're just going to use it in one spot. But you may notice the closer something gets, the more it looks like it's starting to warp due to that large frame of view. So that's another thing you have to keep in mind with this camera. If you're trying to use it up close, this may not be the best camera to use about 2 or so feet away from you if you are not a fan of this warped look. But I think that this camera is perfect for living room situations, which is why this camera is designed the way it is from Nintendo, with the large field of view, being able to go upwards of 1080p to give them a little bit more image quality when you start zooming in from far away, so you can have those smaller portrait shots in games. Not to mention, it also has some pretty good quality, because now at this point, if we do a side-by-side here between a 1080p webcam from Nintendo and a 4K webcam from a completely different company, Insta360, you can see it does look better when you throw a 4K webcam in the mix, but it actually still holds its ground really well. So I do think the Switch 2 camera looks pretty good. Its motion is pretty comparable to any other webcam I've seen. We're not in the dark ages of webcams anymore, where we have very choppy looking frame rates with bad washed out colors or anything like that. At this point, I say this camera will get the job done for most people. It looks really nice given the right environment. Plus, this large field of view can be really useful in living room situations, which is where this camera is going to shine the most. But that's going to do it for this little quality comparison section where we get the, check out the quality of the Switch 2 webcam. So let's go ahead and continue the unboxing portion of this said video.
What's nice about the Switch 2 is that we can use more than just this kind of camera to it. And I have another webcam here for comparison as well. So this is the Osbot Meet 2. This is a very high quality webcam, being able to go up to 4K at 30 frames per second or 1080p 60 frames per second. And it's just your standard old USB webcam. And in fact, I can even use the USB cable that came with this. So I can just take this out, take it off the base, and I can just plug this into the back of my camera and connect this camera to my Nintendo Switch 2. Now, there's not a guarantee that every single webcam on the market will be compatible with the Switch 2. In the actual OS of the console, there is a webcam testing software, so you can see if your webcam is capable of being used with the Switch 2 or not. So I'm just using this one as a comparison. I'm not 100% sure if the Osbot Meet 2 works on the Switch 2. This is just a camera I had lying around for comparison purposes. But it does have a privacy filter on here that's a magnet. So we can take a look at the system as it does have, metal magnets here. So we can see, is that base actually a magnet for my stand? Is it actually metal? And it's not really, because if I connect, my stand is not actually holding a grip here. So it does seem like this is just a finish and not necessarily full on metal. But it does feel very robust, so it gave me the illusion that this was a metal stand. It's not the same kind of metal that a magnet could attach to. But just to compare lenses here really quick, because this here is a 1080p webcam, presumably it's 1080p 30 frames per second. This here is the Osbot Meet 2, again at 4K 60, or 4K 30, excuse me, and 1080p 60. And the lenses are very similar. Webcams have come a very long way over the years, so this does look like a pretty nice sensor. We will just have to see how this camera looks using it on the Nintendo Switch 2, which I'll be looking at in a future video. But for now, this does feel like a very nice, robust camera here. Nice cable routing for your USB-C camera. Just being able to plug it in on the back and just attach it here. Have a privacy shutter to close it off. And just to use it with your said console here, it's very easy to take the camera and hook it up using the included cable to the very top, just like so. So now we have a webcam for our Switch 2. And this is very useful, but it's going to depend on the person if they need the actual camera here for the Nintendo Switch 2 or not, or even if they can just use their very own camera like how I have with my own, because even a camera like this has one added benefit of having its own stand that can, in fact, be used on the system itself and just clamp to the console. And some people may want this. There are other third-party options that can just plug directly into the USB-C and then just hang out here. There's even other options for tabletop cameras, where we have one made by Hori, which is in the shape of a piranha plant. So if you just wanted something more novel instead of the official camera from Nintendo, you have options out there. And that's what's nice about the Nintendo Switch 2's camera functionality. You don't necessarily need the one from the company, but if you want the Nintendo Switch 2 camera functionality, the Nintendo Switch 2 camera is a good way of going, especially to make sure your camera will 100% work with your games along with the game chat functionality on the console. But yeah, this is a nice little camera. I'll definitely be using this for some gaming stuff on the Switch 2, and especially for chatting with my friends using the game chat feature. But there you have it. That is the Nintendo Switch 2 along with a bunch of its different accessories, including the Nintendo Switch 2 Pro Controller and the Nintendo Switch 2 camera. This is overall a very robust feeling console that I'm very excited to play the brand new Mario Kart along with a lot of other Switch 1 games with their enhancements, say with Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom, and even games coming out in the future for the system, either be with future enhancements for Switch 1 games or brand new Switch 2 releases like Donkey Kong Bonanza. This is going to be a very exciting time for us Nintendo fans, as now we have ourselves a brand new console with brand new experiences, either new or old, on the horizons. I'm very much looking forward to playing around with my Nintendo Switch 2, and I hope whoever else has gotten their hands on a Nintendo Switch 2 enjoys their time with this said console as well. That's going to conclude today's unboxing video. I will be making a follow-up Nintendo Switch 2 video in the future, talking about my overall impressions with the console along with some of its games, so definitely check back in a future date for that said video. And if it's up by the time you're watching this unboxing, then I'll be leaving a link to that said video in the video description, and it will also be here on the end card at the end of this video. But with that said, that's going to do it for today's video. Thank you all for watching, hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys next time.